Okay, so you all should be a pop-up for the recording getting started. And I know there were some people that could not attend, so they were looking forward to the webinar. So I will quickly say, if you are seeing my screen, you should see the Reducing Diesel Emissions for Healthier Tennessee page on our website. And we will load on this page the video right here somewhere just underneath or around these documents and information that's at the top. Okay, thank you all for joining us for this webinar about the 2021-22 Reducing Diesel Emissions for Healthier Tennessee State EPA funding. And so I'm going to jump in and explain a little bit about what we have, at least in these sections right here, for you to obtain. Note that the deadline is January 22nd next year. That is a and that's wrong. It's the 21st. And I will go change this because the 22nd is a Saturday, and I don't want to make anybody work on a Saturday. I believe everywhere else we have the 21st. Yes, and that's correct. So tomorrow I will get this changed. If that totally screws somebody up, we might take it on the 22nd. But that is the end of the third full week in January. This particular application is pretty short. There are some things that folks need to make sure and fill out this year that may be different, and we will cover those in the webinar. So on the right, you have the entire, right here, the entire 33-page PDF. If you click it, it will open this document. So this is the PDF. Just so you know, it goes about, what is it? 11 pages with basic information, and then there is the applications for vehicle engines and conversions, which is likely to be almost 100% of everybody applying. We do accept applications for truck stop electrification and electrified truck refrigeration units, or what's called ETRU, and there is a separate, after the 5 pages for that application, there's a landscape version, and that's for the TSE and ETRU. So don't fill that one out. That one's just 3 pages. Fill out the one that is vertical that says vehicles, engines, and conversions on it. Once you get past there, it's all appendices. So just know that even though it's 33 pages, really it's about, 10 plus pages that you need to read that are the important ones that hold most of the necessary information. Now, the other things you will find on this page are, first, a fillable PDF version of just the vehicles, engines, and conversions application. That is these pages, and there's some basic information to fill out at the top, and then it gets into the vehicles you want. Any fleet can apply for a maximum of 15. That's language we've been using for a few years. With interest in the program rising, I think that number's probably high. We may change that and reduce that number to 10 or a little bit less than that in future years. But it's basically space for vehicle number 1 to say, is this a vehicle replacement, an engine replacement, or a conversion? And then these fields: vehicle make, the old one is an International F4500, whatever. But there's room for you to put all this information in here. I would definitely plan on, if you open it in a browser window, go ahead and download, save it to your hard drive, wherever you save documents, and then open that one and edit it and save as you go. Don't try working in the one in your browser. It might not work when you try to do the save. The second page is meant to be repeated if someone is going to apply for over 3 vehicles. If someone's applying for only 1 vehicle, you can fill out this page, skip this page, and go straight into answering the questions on page 3. And then there's page 4, and you're done. If you have, for some reason, more than 3, then the idea is to take this and make additional pages, and you can fill that out. If you are applying for more than 3 vehicles, and you will let me know, I will make a version and post it right here that is just this page as an addition. So if anybody wants that assistance, let me know. I can make another one. So you'll have this in the application, then you'll have another page that's already ready for you to make other versions of that will be a fillable PDF that you can save as not an appendices, but just additional vehicle pages when you submit the application. Okay, then there's also Title VI. We're having to be a little bit more careful and make sure Title VI is covered. And so there is a pre-audit survey. I'm going to go back to the master document just a minute and continue where I was talking about earlier. You get down to page 11 or so, and then it goes to the first application. And then it goes to the TSE and E-True, and then it goes into, there's a short little additional information for those that might need it about gross vehicle weight ratings and classes and some other clarifications of what we're looking for in data. And then there is a 2-page Title VI pre-audit survey. We need everyone to fill this out. I have not made a fillable version of this. If folks, I don't think I did, maybe I did. No, that's just the PDF. If folks are interested, let me know and I can make a fillable version of this. I don't think it would take too long. It's checked boxes and some fields to answer these questions. Everybody must fill this out. Now, this is where, Shauna, I may get a clarification from you. If we find out that they are already in the TDEC system for Title VI, they may still need to fill out some of the other appendices, or where do things change, whether they, if they're already in the TDEC system?
Sure. So for context, what Title VI, what Jonathan's referring to, is a federal requirement that is placed on any dollars that are from the federal government and distribute downwards. These are federal monies from the Environmental Protection Agency under the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, or DIRA program, which Jonathan administers these dollars in partnership with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, who receives the funding from EPA, delivers it to Jonathan's team at the East Tennessee Clean Fuels Coalitions, and makes it available for projects under the Reducing Diesel Emissions for a Healthier Tennessee program. Because these dollars are federally sourced, that requirement at the federal level for Title VI carries down to everybody that receives those funds, including applicants for this program. What Title VI is about is essentially making sure that recipients of federal funds have in place measures to ensure non-discrimination within its own workplace and with interactions with its customers. So this Title VI pre-audit survey that you're looking at is something that all applicants for any funds under TDEC funding programs, because we are a recipient of federal funds, needs to fill out. And the questions are going to pertain to essentially the ability of your organization to document its non-discrimination policies, its diversity measures, and other relevant details. It's a relatively short audit survey. It shouldn't take too long to do, but I want to flag it as something that maybe you start with at the same time that you're searching for eligible vehicles within your unit, because sometimes this will require, a fleet manager to be interacting more with their HR person than they usually do, and HR might have to answer some of this stuff for you within your organization. So I really recommend you look at the Title VI stuff sooner rather than later, in case you do have to rope in additional voices within your organization to help fill it out. There is, for a lot of the programming under like the VW settlement, Environmental Mitigation Trust, which could fund similar vehicle replacement projects in past programs, we administered all of that under the TDEC grants management system online. It's called Smart Simple. What Jonathan was referring to earlier by, if you filled this out recently, you might not have to do it. Essentially, it would be if you as an applicant are already in the TDEC grants management system because you applied for funding from a different source rather than this funding, which is not in the Smart Simple program. If you know that you did that within the last year and have supplied this Title VI information in the grants management system within the last year, you would not have to do it now. We would just have to get verification from you saying, I've already done it, and I could go into the system and check that your Title VI compliance application has already been completed for the year. If you completed it somewhat recently, but it wasn't within the last year, unfortunately, it does mean you need to fill it out again. So it all needs to be within 12 months of the date of your application submission. So just keep that in mind. I know that it's a little bit confusing. If you have questions, you can certainly reach out to me and Jonathan. But just know that if you don't know, if you don't really have familiarity with this, it's likely you might not have submitted it before. So make sure that the pre-audit survey is something that you fill out and submit along with the application Jonathan just walked through, as well as the appendices at the back. There's templates there for 3 different types of Title VI policies, one pertaining to non-discrimination policies, one pertaining to a policy on how your organization provides assistance for limited English proficiency customers and employees in your area, and then one on what the policy is for receiving Title VI complaints from employees and customers. Those are 3 policies that we are required at the state to check that our applicants have within their system before we would allow them to receive funds from the federal government. So the pre-audit survey is something you have to fill out and supply with your application. And the other policy templates that I was just talking about, if you have these policies already adopted for your agency, you just send us the version of the policies that your agency has already. But if you don't have any of these types of policies adopted, those templates provided in Appendix B, C, and D, those are there for you to be able to essentially fill in your organization name and adopt internally to say, yes, we do have the policies in place and therefore are eligible to receive federal funds. So this is all separate from the application that Jonathan just put through, but you are going to have to be providing all of those policy documents and that pre-audit survey at the time you return the application to Jonathan in January. If you have questions on that, again, reach out to me and Jonathan. I know it's a little bit of a complicated question for people, but we do need to make sure that everyone is Title VI compliant, again, because these are federal funds and that is a requirement. If it is violated, we actually at the state would be poised to perhaps lose some funding in the future. So it's very important that this is met. And if you have questions, just reach out.
So adding to that a little bit, Debbie, I'll use you as an example. More than likely, if Hawkins County has received federal funds for something in the past few years, you probably already have this stuff developed. I don't know if you're the person that handles it or someone else, but if you have a LEP plan policy, then you won't need this template. I mean, literally the other 3 things other than the first one are templates. And so know that let's see here. Yes, for the Title VI, there's 3 Word-based versions down here. These are not fillable PDFs. These are Word documents. So you can download that and go in and change all the, oops, wrong one. All the highlighter stuff is there. You can go through and make easy changes to that to make a version of that for you and your application if you don't have them. So just to reiterate, there's one for limited English proficiency, that's Appendix B. There's one for non-discrimination, that's Appendix C. This is a 1-pager. So this one is really quick. Obviously, county commission, the board of directors, whomever has to buy off on something if you don't have these. But the work that Shauna did to really make this easy for you all is she provided these templates. So just know there are Word versions of those down here, A, B, C, D, for easy manipulation when if you need to make them. So the other things that are in the document are some sample scrappage images, and then there is also a template scrappage verification letter that has also been it's up here because this all is Title VI. This template for scrappage verification is provided to you as a Word document as well to make it easier for you to use. I will show you that page and some scrappage images that can show you where you need to get some information, including what might be vehicle identification numbers and or model numbers. If we do ask for the EPA engine family name and model year, This gets onto the usually the metal stamp that is on the engine itself, because one important criteria is to note that what we're asking for is not the vehicle model year, but the engine model year. That's what we go by. So this is just some examples of plates where you can find this information and the family name and a year. And every once in a while, you know, there's hoses and stuff running around here. Sometimes you have to move stuff out of the way, take a picture with or without the flash on, you know, just depending on your camera and where you are, because in the right place, the flash will blank it out to where you can't read it. But these are just some examples of holes that have been drilled, frame rails cut in half. And then here's the template verification letter. So it asks for these pieces of information. So you're going to have to fill out one for each vehicle. And then it basically says, yes, you certified that you got this stuff done, and then you can do the necessary signing, including a signature from the dismantler scrapper. So that is vehicle scrappage letter. The last thing in here is a training certificate. If you have to take Title VI training, then you can get a certificate that basically looks like this. And remind me, Shauna, if you will, for the training certificate, for those that are not in the TDEC system, they may already have this stuff and not just be in the TDEC system, or they may not have these materials. If they don't have them, I mean, it could be that they don't have them or that you don't have them. They have them, but TDEC doesn't. Do they have to get this training certificate either way?
So the way that the training certification works, I just want to clarify for everybody. I think there's language at the end of the application on Title VI specifically that will help people outline like what is going to be due when. What is due at the time of application in January is the filled out pre-audit survey that Jonathan went through, and then documents proving that you have adopted policies for a non-discrimination policy, a limited English proficiency policy, and a policy detailing the complaint process for Title VI complaints. Those are the 4 things that are due at the time of application, at which point East Tennessee Clean Fuels Coalition and TDEC will be meeting, reviewing all of the applications and selecting who we're going to be moving forward with for funding. At that time, when we are notifying people of their funding receipt, that is when you would have to provide documentation of Title VI training. The Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation provides a free online Title VI training course, which is linked in the paragraph towards the bottom of this page. That is where you could go to take TDEC's online Title VI training course. It takes about an hour to complete. And when it comes to, okay, I will have to search internally at TDEC to see if that link needs to be changed or updated. But
and we will fix that and put a new one in here. Sorry, go ahead, Shauna.
Yeah, when it comes to that free online course, you at the end of it, it gives you a certificate that says, you know, I've completed this, I've taken the class XYZ. You don't have to take the TDEC Title VI course if, for whatever reason, you've already got some form of non-discrimination training in place within your agency. Or perhaps you recently got a grant from the Tennessee Department of Transportation and took their Title VI training recently. You would be able to provide that as a that certificate as an example of completing that type of training too. So it really does, you know, we're flexible in the sense that if you have policies that aren't necessarily like the TDEC version, but you have other types of training or other types of policies on this front, we're flexible to allow you to provide that other type of documentation. The point of us including all of the appendices and the link to the TDEC Title VI training is if you don't already have those resources, you can use the templates that TDEC has provided to be able to take that kind of training or provide those types of policies. So we won't ask for the training certification form and the proof, like the certificate of you actually completing the training, until you've been selected for funding. And we'll have more information on that when we've gotten to the point that we've selected the funding recipients. But for now, focus on the pre-audit survey and getting the documentation of the non-discrimination policy, the limited English proficiency policy, and the Title VI complaint policy. Those are the 4 things that are due at the time of application.
And it looks like I found the training link, so we will get that taken care of. And I guess there's an online training version that has the PowerPoint tutorial and then a way to take the test. And I guess you take this test and then a certificate that looks very similar to the one we looked at a moment ago is what you'll end up with. Okay, so now what I want to do is kind of just run through the RFP and an application guide and kind of explain a couple of parts of this. So I'm just going to start off here. I think everybody's seen we have a total of $310,000. Know that, you know, as many people get interested in all things electric, that is wonderful. We just happen to know that in the medium and heavy duty market, electric versions of those are typically, you know, 100 to 200% more than the cost of a diesel. So fuels like propane and CNG are probably going to be less incremental cost, and thus the amount we may be awarding an individual fleet would be less, so that we can award more people out of that $310,000. We certainly are interested in folks that have electric vehicle applications, because as many of you may know, if you've read any of these materials, we do have a little bit of a preference and a priority on school buses. We're trying to positively impact student health through this program in a similar way that EPA does with some of the national school bus grants that they have. But we will take any proposals. Just know the bigger the total dollar amount of the vehicle you're asking for, and the larger chunk you're asking for in terms of funds, because we have a limited amount of money, the odds probably go down depending on exactly what you're asking for. It could have to do with what kind of impact you could have with that new vehicle. But, and with that, I'll get into the some details about what we prioritize and what you can ask for, what the maximum amount you can ask for different vehicles is here in just a minute. Okay, goal of the DIRA program is to reduce diesel emissions. Everything you apply for has to have an older vehicle that was a diesel. So some people miss that, and those vehicles have to have some criteria, like so many years of life left on them, and we will cover that as well. Every once in a while, people get confused and don't realize that they have to have an old diesel to start with. So you have to be replacing something that has a certain amount of life left on it, and we will cover that in just a moment. We've talked a little bit about the different ways you can do vehicle replacement, which is 99% of what we get in this grant. It is possible to do engine replacement, and you can do alt fuel conversions too. We talked for a moment about TSE and E-True. That is also in here. The entity must be located or have a physical presence in Tennessee. There's actually language in here as well about the percent of time that the vehicles need to be in Tennessee. Tennessee's a long, skinny state. Certainly Chattanooga and Memphis are the easy ones to pull out. Places like Bristol, Tennessee as well, where somebody has a business base there and serves the area. I believe the number is you have to spend 70% of the time, or the vehicles have to spend 70% of the time in Tennessee during operations. We will double check that here in just a minute. Applicants do have to intend to operate these vehicles for a minimum of 5 years in Tennessee. Okay, eligible vehicles. There's all kinds of medium and heavy duty trucks that folks can apply for. There's also school buses. This actually says type A in it, and to have fun with the American language, I believe that's a typo, because type A's typically are beneath class 5 which is what's required here. I could be wrong. There could be some type A's out there that are class 5, where someone has an old one that's diesel. If that's the case, you can apply to replace that vehicle. It also includes transit buses. Transit buses are so expensive that I think probably we ought to remove this in the future, Shauna, just because of knowing the costs of those, and they're pretty much out of the league based on their total costs. But if someone wants to apply for one, you can, even though your cost request may be too high for us to be able to handle it. I've talked a little bit about this. I don't want to spend too much time there. Note, this is a pretty important table to EPA and to us. But first of all, it's asking for the current engine model year. So the fact that you have a 2006 and a 2007 school bus or yard dog, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It's the engine model year. And we've seen examples where the engine model year is newer than the vehicle, examples where they're the same. And there's probably examples where the engine model year was older than the vehicle, especially if you go back in time. But for vehicle or engine replacements, you can do 2006 to 2009 as the old one. You cannot do 2010 and newer unless it's what called the new vehicle you would be getting is either zero emission or low NOx. Low NOx is defined as the national standard for NOx emissions, that's nitrogen oxides, is 0.2 grams per brake horsepower hour. EPA defines low NOx as 0.1. It's half of the national standard, 0.2. If the propane, CNG, whatever it is, that's not an electric vehicle reaches 0.1 or lower, then you can apply to replace 2010 and newer engine model year newer vehicles. If it is zero emission, it can be any time in the past. So if it's a electric version, then it can also be 2010 or newer. Okay, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but just go over some of the high points here. Must operate in Tennessee for 70% or more of the time. There's that line on page 5. There's some criteria about vehicles. You can't use something in new service. It has to basically replace what the old one was doing. It needs to be of similar GVWR. You can't replace a class 5 with the class 7. I think there may be a little wiggle room to downsize or upsize something, maybe one class, but you're going to have to request through me an exception for that, and we can ask EPA if they will allow that, especially if maybe you're trying to downsize a little bit. The older one you needed was a little bigger. The newer one can be a little bit smaller. Just no big jumps in size are generally not approved. Okay, now this is stated twice in this application. So we want to make sure that you see this. There's some new things that EPA has added, and that includes, first of all, and this was there in the past, this is not that much different, but the existing diesel vehicle must be fully operational. This has been a requirement for a few years. This is not really a new one. But I think EPA may have used 2 years in the past, but the vehicle has to have at least 3 years of remaining useful life on it. The existing diesel vehicle was owned and operated by the applicant for at least 2 years prior to replacement. You can't buy and switch something. And then last but not least, the really new requirement is existing diesel vehicles have to have traveled at least 7,000 miles per year during the 2 years prior to replacement or upgrade. And there is a caveat for school districts in that they may use, because of the impact of COVID on them, they may use calendar year 2019, the most recent full calendar year before COVID, to report their miles per year for their vehicles, the school buses.
And Jonathan, I'm going to interrupt you here on the note of a caveat for school buses. We reflected earlier on the table that showed the gross vehicle weight rating requirements for school buses versus transit buses versus medium and large trucks. EPA actually does accept type A through D school bus applications because they are the only type of vehicle that is not bound to the gross vehicle weight rating requirements of class 5 and above. So no typo there. And I know that we have several school bus interested parties on this line likely. So I just wanted to clarify that type A is eligible. It is not bound to the class 5 and up requirement that is applied to medium trucks and transit buses.
Well, and as someone who is the expert I lean on, Paula may know better than I. And Paula, if you're with us, please feel free to chime in. But my understanding is there's a lot of type A's out there that are gas. So just the body of type A's in Tennessee that might be gas versus diesel. My understanding is diesel is a smaller of the number, not the greater. But
well, it depends on how old the bus is. Honestly, I used to sell almost primarily all diesel type A's, and then they went away for the most part. The only one we can get it on now is the Ford Transit chassis, and that's a little different type A. So on older buses, yes, there are still several out there that are diesel, but you are correct in saying that predominantly they are gasoline now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
You're
both
welcome.
for clarifying that. Okay, scrappage requirements. This really not much has changed here. You have to scrap the old one. And it was a good friend at TDEC and then TDOT many years ago who since retired who explained this way one year. And some people look at that and well, why would I get rid of a good bus? Why won't you replace one that's near end of life for us? That's because what EPA is trying to do this is purchase emissions reductions. That's really the most simple way to look at this. So they don't want to replace a vehicle that is basically dead for you. They want to place one that's still operating with something cleaner so that we know there's going to be emissions reductions. So just a quick explanation of why EPA does things the way they do. There has to be, as you saw the photos earlier, and for most of these has seen this before and participated in other EPA and other federal grants, it is not uncommon nowadays to have a hole drilled in the engine, in this case, a 3-inch hole, and the need to cut the frame rails in half. We have seen a variety of ways, especially looking at school buses, that districts have handled this, all the way from they figure out how to tow it to the scrap yard where they're going to scrap it, because obviously you cut some frame rails in half, much less drill a hole in the engine. It's going to be hard to drive it, much less move it. Even if you're towing something, I don't think you're going to do that with the frame rails cut in half. So you can take it to the scrap yard. We know of several districts that have done that. And then either they will use their own tools, the school district, or the tools of their scrapyard partners to take care of that, take their photos before they let the scrapyard take it on for crushing or whatever they may be doing to it. Let's see here.
One thing that I do want to point out, if you could scroll up, Jonathan, or a little bit back down. So
Yeah.
sorry.
Sure.
Equipment and vehicle components that are not part of the engine or chassis may be salvaged from the unit being replaced. So, you know, it's not like you have to get rid of it wholesale. But one thing that is noted here, this is an EPA requirement. If a disabled engine, disabled vehicle, disabled chassis, or other parts are to be sold, program income requirements will apply, meaning that we will reduce the total award by the amount that you would make for selling a disabled vehicle. Why is that? In case that's something that might be troublesome to some people, it's because EPA is not funding projects for an organization to make an additional profit off of. They're paying to, like Jonathan said, secure these diesel emissions reductions, and therefore are not, you know, incentivizing you to be able to make money off of the sale of the old equipment that you were paid to replace. So in case you have questions about that, certainly reach out. And again, if you want to be able to use parts of the vehicle that was scrapped to keep for, you know, other engine or vehicle upgrades or replacement parts for future stuff, that's just fine. It's really when it's sold is when the program income requirements are triggered. So just want to point that out.
Well, that's an important point. Thank you, Shauna. And let me ask an add-on question to that. So, because I've seen school districts both just scrap a vehicle, and then the value of the scrap, they get a $400, $900 check. And then I've seen people actually sell them. Somebody wants the Cummins engine that was in it or whatever. And so even if the thing is almost disabled and there's a hole in the block, somebody wants that enough to where they're going to pull parts off that Cummins engine because they can repair something they have with those. If someone doesn't sell it, but gets income off the scrapping, does that count as value that has to be counted against the grant, or is that different?
I would assume yes. We can certainly reach out to EPA if we want additional clarification on this. But I would just at this point advise applicants to know that that is a requirement that's passed down from the federal funds, and we can certainly reach out to EPA for more guidance. And there's a link there to 40 CFR 31.25 that does spell out what the federal program income requirements are and how they're taken into account in determining the actual amount that we would be able to reimburse if there were profits made off of parts of the project.
And to further make this point, if for school district X, they usually sell their buses either, through an online vending system to people in the community that want them, whatever it may be, you can still do that. But based on the award, let's just say from numbers I've seen, they get $600 a bus. If somebody applies for 5 school buses and is going to get, let's just say it's $10,000 a bus, that $10,000 per bus is going to be reduced by the amount that scrappage, if it was $600, that it means you're going to get $9,400 in the reimbursement because of that income from the bus. So we recognize that reduces some of the value of the grant, but hopefully for most of the grant applicants, the funds are still much more valuable than that slight loss in what you would get. Okay. EPA, East Tennessee Clean Fuels may choose to select an applicant to be awarded funding, but may request a reduction in the amount of funding to be included in the award depending on the total number of applicants received. So here's what we tell most of our applicants. As we noted earlier, we have about $310,000 available this year. What we do is suggest that applicants propose for the maximum they can, which we're going to cover in just a second right here, but understand that we would like to get as much emissions reductions out of this funding as is possible. So what's probably going to happen, this has happened most of the recent 5 or 6 years, we've had more applications in total dollar ask. If we had $300,000 last year, we might have gotten $450,000 in applications. So versus just pick a few that fit that and call them winners and the others lose out, we would like to fund as many of these vehicles as possible. So I might, after you all submit documents by January 21st, it's really that next week that I'm going to be speaking with everybody that had an application and say, okay, if you applied for 20% of the total cost of the replacement vehicle for 4 vehicles, could that be 20%? Could that be 15%? Could we work to another number so that we can still be able to fund you all, but also be able to fund as many people as possible in the grant program? So again, note that here are the numbers. If you're going to get a new vehicle that meets the NOx standard, that could be new diesel, could possibly be propane, it might be CNG. I think a lot of propane and a lot of CNG actually meets this low NOx standard. If you would have bought a new diesel and it would have cost $100,000, and let's say you go for a CNG version that costs $130,000, you can ask for 25% of $130,000. That's the maximum you can ask for. If the vehicle meets their low NOx option. And the way we find that is we have to know the specific engine and engine model year for that, and we go find the CARB certification for that engine, or we call the manufacturer and get that, and it has not on the EPA cert, but on the CARB cert, the actual emissions testing number. So we can help you all find that. You need to get with me sooner rather than later, so I have time to hunt that if you need that help. But if it does, if the new vehicle meets low NOx, then you can ask for up to 35%. If it has no tailpipe, you can ask for up to 45%. We usually don't get into engine replacements and conversions that much. I'm not going to cover TSE and E-True. This information is in the document. So I'm going to jump to really the dates. So it was released on the 10th. It's due 5 p.m. Central, close of business on January 21 Central Time. Tennessee is a mix of Eastern and Central Time, so we used the latter time zone, that's 6 p.m. Eastern. A week later, I'm going to try to have all those discussions with recipients and see how recipients may be able to adjust what you were requesting, if that's possible. Hopefully by less than a month later, about 3 weeks later, we will be able to get the contracts to you all and completed contracts or agreements. And then the vehicles need to be put in service by August 15. Now, there's a note right here. If vehicle ordering timelines make it difficult to meet this deadline, the applicant may notify us in their application. I'm going down to the application real quickly to show you where to do that. So on page 3, questions or additional information. In the PDF version, there's a box right here that allows you to add in for any information. So you can put that here. If as Paula, at least in Tennessee, pretty well known in terms of buses as a Bluebird representative, if someone gets quote some information from Bluebird and you don't think you may get it till September, October, it would be great if you would put that in here. It might be that even if you don't include that, I may be calling you back during that week of trying to see how many folks we can fund to ask that question. So you need to kind of be ready when you get a quote from someone, make sure delivery schedules and an estimated date of delivery that's real world based on everything that's going on nowadays is included here.
And we should be able to pin down that date for them. We've had some changes this year, but moving forward next year, they're telling us it's going to be a long delivery time, but they're being able to tell us when it will happen.
And from talking to someone else, Paula, I think they were saying, you know, times are doubling, but what used to be 3 to 4 months is 6 to 8 months.
Yes.
So you know, if they can order it in February, hopefully it's going to be pretty close to August, September to be able to get it.
That is what we are being told from Bluebird right now. Yes. About 6 months lead time for us.
Gotcha. Okay. Title VI requirements, Shauna already spoke about that. There may be some monitoring. In the past for recipients, we have done this, not for everybody, but for some of the applicants. It could include coming and seeing the new buses, and us to even though you've sent us some photos, we may do an on-site visit to come and see those, as well as any infrastructure that may be going with vehicles, especially if they are alternative fueled. Or we may do kind of remote monitoring in terms of getting some more information out of you, the applicant. Okay. The application, what's required? Fill out the application. That's number 1. Make sure you have the documentation, the information for each of the vehicles you want to apply for included. The vehicle title and registration for each of the older diesels must be included. It's item number 2. Number 3, we need a quote from whoever's providing the equipment. So we have verification of the amount you're using and the requests for the amount you'd like in reimbursement. On page 4, there are some eligibility acknowledgements. So in just a moment, I will go to that section and we will review that. Title 4, we've already talked about. If you folks have questions, when we get to the end here in just a minute, we can go over those questions. You can just email your application to us. If for some reason that's difficult, you may use other choices. You just need to contact me and I can give you a fax number. We can come up with another way if for some way that may be difficult for you. If you can submit them via email, here's the email address to send them to and the subject that needs to be in the email. All right. We will look at a number of criteria to determine who we can fund. We'd like to kind of fund everybody. Newer applications, especially newer applications of new alternative fuel vehicles that we've not funded before or where no vehicles exist. That's something that might bump you up the recipient scale. Completeness of the application, I think that's obvious. If we're missing a bunch of information, that's going to be hard to do the evaluation. And I've got about a week to do that checking against various vehicles. So we really need to have everything, especially as much as we need the Title VI documentation, et cetera, we need all the data that goes with the vehicles so we can make an effective comparison. Geographic diversity and fleet type diversity. For example, we've not funded any new yard dogs or what is a tractor at a terminal operation for Class 8 trucking. That's something that might get you put a little bit higher in terms of the getting funded. How are you going to have a positive impact on the community from doing this? So there's questions in the application about how are you going to promote this project if you were awarded. And so what you write there could have an impact on where you stand in the pecking order or what we're able to offer you. So there's a couple other things, but just know that this list is in there. And then the priority that we use is right after that. First of all, it's alt fuel school buses and alt fuel any other vehicle are the higher priorities. And then it's new diesel school buses and new diesel everything else. That's that priority. So all these will go together for us to kind of assess that order. And before I start going through to figure out who do we really want to fund and how much can we offer depending on how much we have in total requests.
And Jonathan, if you don't mind, I'm going to pause you there just to answer a question that I've received a few times about DIRA and something that might be on your mind looking at this application evaluation list, and particularly the bullet on us incentivizing applicants who have an ability to complete the project by the deadlines that have been denoted in the schedule that we're about to get to. DIRA is a fast-moving program in the sense that we get funds every year, and EPA's preference is that we spend down those funds within the year. Spend down doesn't just mean purchase the vehicles, it means having the new vehicles delivered, us making sure that the scrappage has been taken care of, and then being able to refund our applicants based on their ability to complete the project. And do note that we won't be refunding anybody until the scrappage is completed, because the project isn't considered completed until the new vehicles are delivered and in service and the old vehicles have been scrapped. We know that from the COVID-19 pandemic onward, there have been a lot of disruptions to supply chain for manufacturers, parts, all raw materials, all sorts of things that have definitely impacted the ability of a manufacturer to turn around a vehicle as quickly as had been possible in the past. And we know that even asking for less than a year's time frame for a new vehicle delivery might be difficult for certain vehicle markets, where that is generally the preference of EPA. EPA is aware of the fact that supply chain issues are just cropping up everywhere, and that will likely impact the ability of the DIRA program to move as quickly as it usually does. So I just want to assure you we understand that that's the case, and we still urge you to apply if you don't, even if you think that your vehicle might take longer than what the timeline that we're about to get into will allow. EPA, again, is aware of this, and we've communicated to them that we anticipate this is going to be a problem. And as long as we're transparent about that, and your engine manufacturer, your vehicle manufacturers, as long as they're being transparent about their actual delivery dates, that's kind of what's most important for us. So definitely do apply. Don't let the timeline that's there scare you. Just know that it's there because DIRA is typically a quite fast moving program where we get new funding each year to deliver to Tennessee.
Thank you, Shauna. I think most people know everybody's having this impact as the clean fuels programs, East and Middle West and Tennessee regularly deal with fleets. We've heard from some different fleets recently. Somebody was talking about ordering an international straight truck. He was told it was going to be 24 months before they would be able to receive it. That's the scary long end. That's probably more Class 8 based. We may see that in medium duty vehicles as well, depending on what kind of vehicle you're looking at. I think the school buses example we were talking about a little bit earlier, that 3 to 4 months has gone to 6 to 8 months. It's kind of a doubling of that. I'm not sure if in international that's part of the problem. We all know of the chip shortages. So I think EPA is starting to recognize this. And as much as, pre-COVID and all the chip shortages and problems we've been having over the last 2 years, one of the good things about this program was that you could get the money fairly quickly as long as you could get the vehicle and within a year put it in service. It's one of the things we kind of hung our hat on, and that was a bonus. Of course, things have turned around. So as Shauna noted, EPA understands this, so we'll figure out what kind of flexibility may be needed. State DIRA money is given to every state. Every state in the country is dealing with these issues right now. Every fleet is. So we'll see how EPA makes some alterations to possibly allow for longer timelines, not only for this year, and I'm not sure for the 2022, 2023 funding, if EPA has the wherewithal, the ability to even back up and try to get the money to the state so that these could be put out sooner. Hope maybe come out in, if we were lucky, August or September 2022 for the 2022-23 year, so that they could keep the August deadline. But that's one of the things hopefully they will consider, other than pushing that deadline back when it's due. So we'll stay in tune and let you know what EPA tells us, but to Shauna's point, please do apply. Contact information for us is there now in the application. I'm not sure we asked for DUNS or cage codes before. If any of you all need help finding these, please contact me. I can help you do so. I'm probably going to need an EIN, the employer identification number, other than the organization's name, to do a lookup on that, but we can help with that. We talked about the vehicle make model year. Those are the easier ones to get. VIN should be able to get pretty good. Odometer usage, meter reading, vehicle registration number, and then it gets into engine. So now this is engine make model year, horsepower, ID or serial number. Those images we were looking at that are at the end of the application are just giving you some examples of where you can find that. Some fleets might write that information down in your tracking system. As far as I know, many don't. So fleets are going to have to look for that plate on a vehicle. It's possible that that plate, due to heat, rubbing of something, whatever, is like shiny and flat. It may have so much stuff crusted on it that you couldn't even clean it off and read it. If needed, we can go back to the manufacturer and get those serial numbers, but you need to start working on that sooner. Let me know if you have a problem. That's also something we may be able to help a fleet with, is trying to find serial numbers. Gross vehicle weight rating should be pretty easy. Annual mileage, fuel use, and idling hours should be something you can fill out, knowing the limitations in the grant, what's required in terms of past usage. Fuel type of proposed replacement. Are you looking for propane, CNG, electric, something else? That's what you're going to fill in here. And then how much are you asking for this vehicle and what was the total cost? That total cost should match what's in the quote you're sending us. And then this funding request should be that appropriate 25, 35, 45% or less, if you want to ask for that, that you're asking for that vehicle. And then there's other pages. I will go ahead and make another one that is just this page and get that fillable PDF put on the website along with that Title VI update, which it looks like I have found that. So that will also be loaded in here. Okay. There's questions here about all the vehicles. The questions that are asked up here are for each vehicle. This is a total. And then there are some additional project questions. When you get into the last page, you basically, in the way it will work in the application, like here, you'll have to check these boxes. And basically you're saying, yes, I understand all this is correct. So this is the place right here where we are repeating. It must be fully operational. You must have owned or operated it for the last 2 years. It must have at least 3 years of remaining life on it, and the accumulation of miles requirement. With that, I think I'm done with most of what we wanted to cover. I think we've covered everything, ordering timelines being longer, Title IV, etc. I'm going to stop there and open it up for questions.
So I do not have any of my customers on here currently. So this is just something I can send to them once it's all, because you've recorded the whole thing, and or will I need to have them come to the website to do this?
Well, first of all, you need to remember the website, because probably right over here is where I'm going to try to get this downloaded, probably loaded to YouTube with some assistance from a staff member. And then we will there'll be an easy way for us to basically put a box, and you'll be able to watch it in this window or expand it and watch the webinar. So
okay,
either
thanks.
way, you're going to come here to get the recording.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
You're welcome. Obviously, Paula, if you start talking to some fleets that haven't been through this before, they're more than happy to call me. And watching that webinar is going to help. They may have some questions from that, but they're welcome to call me and pose questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jonathan.
You don't mind me asking, Chad, who are you with?
I'm with Monroe County,
Gotcha.
Tennessee.
Gotcha. Okay. Debbie or Chad, any other questions?
So this grant is not for 100% purchase of a vehicle?
That's correct. It'll cover 25, 35, or 45%. 25% is new diesel. It could be other alt fuels that don't meet that low NOx standard. 35% is if it's alternative fuel like propane, primarily, also CNG, that will probably meet that 0.1 grams per brake horsepower NOx. And then 45% if it has no tailpipe. And Chad, for your information, you may already know this, but electric school buses, I mean, instead of it costing $90,000 to $105,000, an electric school bus is $350,000 to $400,000. So this particular grant is probably not going to be real beneficial for those that want to acquire electric school buses. Separately, Chad, you should know that Savannah Robertson, that you see on this webinar, and I are working on communicating with districts across the state to ask what kind of interest you have in electric. So I don't know if your interest is kind of propane, electric, or diesel, but if for any reason it is electric, we should plan to exchange information, or you can just, you've got my email from the application right here, my phone number. But we would love to talk with you directly if you are interested in electric. If you're interested in propane, we can talk about that as well. If you're interested in diesel, it will cover up to 25% of the cost of the new bus.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I don't have any questions right now, but I'm sure that when I get started on this thing, I may be hollering at you.
Well, and Debbie, you probably know you've got a couple of neighbors that are using propane school buses. Hancock
Yes.
County, Greene County,
Hancock,
Washington County, there's several in the area. And my understanding from all of them, especially Joseph Southern, is one of the closest folks to you in Hancock County. He's done well with his program. And then Washington County has the only electric school bus in the state. So you've got some people nearby that can help show you some things. And I don't know for Hawkins County, Debbie, if you're the person we would communicate with, but same thing I said to Chad, if you guys, because some things have gone on in Hawkins County recently that might help you all possibly get some electric buses. We will see, but happy to talk with you or anybody else in Hawkins County about different alt fuels if you all want to set up a call for that.
okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I was going to let you know, Joseph has said that he is available to help anybody who has questions. So
He has been very
Yeah.
helpful over the
Yeah.
last few years.
yes, and he has worked hard to learn all this, and he's doing a great job. So he has let me know to go ahead and pass on his information if you do need his help.
And Chad, for you, there's really, depending on what you're interested in, there's nobody that's like right in your backyard. I'm just looking at a Tennessee county map over next to my desk. But there are folks not far away. There's propane school buses operating in Knox County. One of the contractors there uses them. Grundy County, I think, has 6 to 8. I could be wrong with that number. And then, there's Clarksville, Montgomery County, Weakley County, way over on the far side of the state, Perry and Hickman counties. There's various counties using propane. Electric's coming slowly, but hopefully with some funding coming out federally, there will be some opportunities for you all to acquire electric buses to start trying those as well. That's not this funding.
I'm thinking that Scott County may have 1 or 2 as well.
Scott won some funding. Oneida City and Scott County applied for some Tennessee.
Yes, Oneida City.
Yeah,
Well, they're not city, Oneida Special.
Not a special. Okay. Yes, they got some propane, I think, through VW funds.
Oneida got 3 propane school buses under the school bus funds in Tennessee.
I know we're over an hour, but have you heard anything, you or Mark heard anything from them on the operation of those buses? I need to talk to, I think his name is Zach.
From what we understand, they've been going well. They did have an unfortunate incident recently where one of their vehicles was totaled. So they're going to have to be, they're going to be purchasing a new propane school bus. So that doesn't have anything to do with the vehicles themselves. It was just an unfortunate accident, but that's the only thing we've really heard recently. I think they're just dealing with that.
I actually did talk with him, and he said they were extremely pleased and had no issues at all with the accident, even though that it was totaled.
You're talking about Zach, Debbie?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good news.
And in case anyone wanted to know, nobody was hurt. We're not hurt seriously. It's just the vehicle that was brand new is totaled. So, oh well, life happens.
Okay, any other questions, folks? All right, we appreciate it. Reach out to me if you have questions to start with. You've been able to meet Shauna. Her contact information is in the grant document. If it's Title VI based, you're probably going to the source in speaking with Shauna. If I can, I will help. But yeah, reach out and let us know if you have questions, and we hope you can apply.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah, you too, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.